I am joined, as we usually are, by Anne Laure Jackson. Hello, Anne.
Hello, great to be here. Good to see you.
This is always a highlight for me every week because, one, you smile a lot and make me feel like, I can get better in the life I live. And also because I love some of the perspectives you have on life that I don't, because it's good to learn from others.
It is so good to learn from others, or at least chat with others. We don't have to agree with others all the time, do we? But it's good how others make us think and then think what is important in life, what do we need to do? What are our priorities in life? And yeah, make decisions from there. So we live happy lives, really.
Yeah, which is part of what we do. How can we live the better life in the life that we have? We can't change everything about where we live or the people we have in our life or our job, but we can make some changes to how we approach our daily lives. And that's where people like you come in, and hopefully where this kind of an interview comes in to show people, whatever issues you might be struggling with, there might be a better way of dealing with this piece of your life that you do have some control over.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really nice. And for me, coming in from a sensory health perspective, it's just checking that, yeah, I can speak into the areas that I really know because of studying and living it for 30 plus years. And just leave those things aside that are not really my area. And it's nice to be able to recognize where our own boundaries lie as well and think, yeah, I can speak with some authority on this. And yeah, I'll leave other things. I might have an opinion on other things, but that's a different matter.
Cool. Right. Now, last week I talked about my heart monitor. I said I would report back on the removal of the sticky pads. So let me just recap this for you if you missed last week. So I had a heart monitor for 5 days. There were 3 sensors I had to put on my chest. Very, very good sticky pads. Didn't want to be removed. A lot of pain. So I asked Anne for her advice. What is the best way of removing these with the least amount of pain from a sensory perspective? And I have some feedback for you.
Oh, this is going to be exciting. I want to find out what worked for you. There were several that were fired out at you, but this is like, what did you come up with, you and your family together? Curious, really curious.
Did you remember what the advice you gave me was?
Well, I know that the main one was the deep touch pressure, but it was also, yeah, eat. No, yeah, use your oral motor, use your vision, use auditory, but it was mainly about the tactile system and perhaps a little bit of proprioceptive muscle work. 'Cause the brain can only absorb and take in so much information. So it's just seeing how we can counteract or how we can overlay the tactile input that you are getting that is painful with something else. I hope that's what you took from it. I don't know. We'll wait
Yeah,
and
yeah.
see. What did you find?
Right. Well, I've got 2 very, very different experiences. One of them was well, actually, got 3. The first one was when I did it without having asked you anything what to do, and it was very painful. I pulled them off. It was very sore. It was the first one. The second experience is when I did what you'd said, which was much better. And the third experience was when I thought it's 2 a.m. The sticky pad needs to be replaced because it's falling off. I'll just get it off the rest of the way now without waking Joe. So I ripped the thing off. That was not so good. But the good was Joe gave me a foot massage for about 5 to 10 minutes. So I was a little bit more relaxed, a little bit less anxious about the pain, actually, because this was several days in. And because you're taking these pads off, it isn't just painful. Now it's painful on top of sores. It actually caused a cup. It actually ripped the skin at one point, taking them off. So they are very, very sticky. But the foot massage was great because I was more calm before the end. And Joe was talking to me in a really calm manner. And then she deep pressed the massage around the area as
Brilliant.
I was pulling it off. And the
Ooh.
pain differential was actually quite enormous. It didn't vanish, but it was so much less painful that I can definitely attest to the listen to the advice of Anne and do what she says, because the pain was much less.
Amen. I'm so glad. Because it's real life. It is real life. It's everyday life. And as you say, you can't choose the circumstances, but we can learn either how to prepare ourselves before, if we know a circumstance is coming up, or sometimes just when we're in the middle of it, or sometimes how we need to recover from an experience that we really didn't want, but wasn't really very sensory healthy at all. I'm so delighted, really delighted for you.
It was good. I think the one where Joe said, she said, do what? Was the massage for 30 seconds after you pull the thing off. And I said, look, this is what she said, to do it not just before or during, but actually deep tissue around the area after for about half a minute. Are you absolutely sure? Says Joe. Yes. So I showed her the email that you sent me. And she did that for 30 seconds afterwards. And the recovery time was so much better,
Mm.
which I think surprised both of us.
Oh, you're so good. You're so good. And it's also because it's the fact that I say some of these things, but people don't put them into practice. And it's one thing, it's lovely being able to say things, but unless you do it, you've got to hear the word and do it. It's not going to have any impact at all. And have a degree of faith to be able to follow some of these things through, and have the humility to actually follow some of these things through, because it's a bit weird sometimes, and some of these things, but they are meeting sensory needs. They're not there to be clever. They're not there necessarily to be understood, unless you want to go into the neuroscience behind some of these things. But really delighted to hear that. And yeah, but both the kind of, really, do we have to? And but also to actually hear genuine testimony to the difference it can make.
It did. I think the thing was, both of us logically could work out foot massage, relaxing, fine. It's going to reduce kind of stress overload or whatever. That made logical sense. But the bit afterwards is a bit that really we were like, well, this is what she said. Let's just go with it. But it just didn't make any sense to us. And I guess that's something you must have covered a lot as well, because some things you'll say and people will say, oh, I get that. That's fine. And other people will go, what did she say? But actually, it's really good.
Yeah. And if I may just take the opportunity to explain a little bit about the nerve tracts, because
Please.
we have mainly two different nerve tracts. One's called the anterolateral system, and that goes up this way, and that takes up the likes of pain and light touch. So that one is a very protective mechanism. If someone touches you unexpectedly, it's just like, ooh, or if someone's going to rip your hair off, that's protection. You would not choose to do that, or go anywhere near anybody who might ordinarily choose to do that for you. And the other one is the dorsal column medial lemniscus system, that takes up deep touch pressure, some vibration, other good tactile experiences, and that overrides the impact of the anterolateral system. So we have our two nerve tracts. It's almost like good and evil, but not, because they both serve a purpose in their own way. But it's the DCML, it's this one that carries the deep touch pressure that we want to be activating, so that by the time these inputs get to the brain, we've got the dorsal column medial lemniscus system pressing down, suppressing, modulating, just all of that input, so that it is less disruptive to the brain. It's less fear evoking. It's less flight, fright, fight responses. So that's why we use the deep touch pressure. And it's the before, the during, the after, just to try and keep a handle on the inputs going through this other nerve tract. So
Is it? I think I remember something of this, but I seem to remember that if you're in pain and you've got no paracetamol, one of the things you can do, especially I remember this from when Jo was pregnant for the first time. Obviously, you're looking forward to the labour, not excited looking forward. I mean, looking ahead to labour, which is going to be painful. So you're trying to minimise. And one of the things I remember them saying is stroke the back of the neck, because what that's going to do is confuse the body just enough to minimize the pain going to the brain. So it's not going to stop the pain, but it'll sort of mishmash the signals, and therefore you will feel less pain. Is that a memory that I did have, and is that right?
Yes, yeah, it's exactly that same kind of thing. And also TENS machines, for anybody who has one of those, it stimulates, it's like a little vibrating machine. Often pregnant women put it on their backs. Again, it gives the brain a different experience to focus on and to concentrate on, and it is using vibration, which is using the DCML to try and mediate and make better other unpleasant circumstances. So anything, and you can touch the body anywhere, and that's where it's just like, okay, you might have other sticky pads up on your upper body, and you think, well, why am I going down and having a foot massage? Why am I touching the feet? Because all of those nerve tracts are connected, and if you give input into one area of the body, it can really help another area of the body. So it doesn't always have to be in the same area, but I do particularly like the fact that Jo could rub around, and did, around the area around where it was particularly sore, because again, you've only got so many nerve tracts in that area, so it's concentrated by getting the better input in, rather than the brain being able to focus and respond to the sore aspects of your experience.
Andy B top tip. So one of the probe things was on the front of the chest. sort of opposite side of the middle to the heart, slightly up, and the other two are both on the sides. So when Joe started to do deep tissue massage on the side, it was in my rib cage on the side. So after we realised I get ticklish quite badly, she tried another place. So Andy B top tip: just make sure if you're massaging somewhere, it's not somewhere you're especially ticklish, like just under the armpit on the side.
And also because tickle goes up the anterolateral system. You don't want the tickle, you know, for most people it's not helpful. So actually if you've got a tickle as well as, it's just like, oh no, you're really firing up that discrimination, that protective tract. That's like,
It was terrible for a moment. I was like, could you just move 2 inches away or something? But yeah, Andy B
the
top
power
tip.
of communication too, and of obedience and just wanting to serve. Bless your dear wife. Yes.
Yes, no, it was good. Right, so there you go. Andy B, real check on life. Just give us that long fancy nerve thingy, because you say it DCLA and it's not going into my head because it's really complicated.
DCML, the Dorsal Column Medial Lemniscus System, the DCML.
Cool. I'm not going to try to say that back. It's not worth the risk. Yes, if you got one of those.
If you're across the water, if you're in the States, I think it might have another name, same as the anterolateral system too. But so it's just sometimes we use British names and sometimes it's Americanisms. And same, we've got like all our hormones, like you've got noradrenaline and epinephrine and all of these kind of things. There are different nuances depending on what particular slant of English we are using.
Very diplomatically said. Right. Okay. I've got these lovely questions that I've been sent, which is great for you. Let's just pick one out at random. Good one. It's half term. In the UK, so most children are off school. How can schools and educators create an inclusive environment for children with sensory processing challenges? And I asked that one because a lot of teachers are off here in the UK. Holidays are around this time. Children are at home, so sort of reflecting back to school starting. So how can schools and educators create an inclusive environment for children with sensory processing challenges?
Oh, that's a big question. First, always want to go and actually assess the individual themselves. So I do have a sensory super system for education, that's for sure. That's a separate aspect of the kind of work that I do, because I love to work with parents and home educators and adults, but there is a separate part of the service for schools so that I can help them do the assessment, because they know what their child is like in school. Children do behave differently in school to how they do at home a lot of the time, and especially with sensory needs they do. So it's about having that relationship, building that relationship, especially if they're in primary school. That's a lot easier. In secondary school, I'm working in some secondary schools and it is more sporadic, but there are some teachers, some TAs, some key workers who are just phenomenal at coming alongside our individuals and taking those 5-10 minutes of conversation to explore. So talk to your individual and validate what they are saying, what they are feeling, and just ask questions about why they might be having struggles with. What is it about handwriting? What is it about sitting still? What is it about PE or in the playground? And just listen. There'll be some interesting comments that will come back, but just taking those few moments of coming alongside and recognizing that I saw something was a bit difficult, or you didn't feel as comfortable. I know when you're really happy and you didn't seem as happy today because of something. And say, I wonder what could it have been this, or just explore, open up those conversations. Because then when we get those conversations going, ideally you would know how to assess their sensory thumbprint anyway. But if you don't, having that information is enough to think. There are some key strategies. Movement breaks are one of the most powerful. And what I mean by movement break is just literally taking a break within the classroom environment. It could be, some children, I don't know if they did, I'm sure they would have done it at your school, just rocking on the chairs, and the teacher would always be like, just stop rocking on your chair. I don't know what they're allowed to do these days, but children, like, that's the vestibular system. Children like to rock. So if they're not allowed to do it on their chairs, either change their chairs, so you get rocking chairs, rocker chairs. And we've got lots of different types of chairs now in schools. And I encourage them to look at different types of seating options that are out there. ones that will challenge their balance a little bit more so that they can actually concentrate while challenging their body that bit more. Otherwise, they'll be off their seat, and some of them are climbing tables and climbing walls. And it's like, let's find a different way to help them be within the classroom if that's where everybody wants them to be. So some different seating options for sure, giving them a break when they can, giving them the opportunity to go away, maybe with some headphones, get a little pop-up tent, a little blackout pop-up tent, just calm the sensory environment, because schools are full on most of the time. Every now and again, we get a little moment of quiet, a little bit of peace, a little bit of space. But that is not typically when any of us think about the school environment. That's not what you get, whether it be university as well. University, colleges, secondary schools, nurseries, they are very, very busy and full on sensory environments.
I do recall at primary school, you brought a memory back somehow. It was one of the teachers, Mr. Vernon, I remember his name. And he was insanely strict. So this is primary school. So if you're thinking ages, I'm thinking sort of below 10, sort of 6 to 10 thereabouts. And I remember his lessons were always, you must sit in silence. You couldn't move. If your pencil made a noise, he would be cross with you. If your foot slipped on the really squeaky metal rung of the table, you'd be in trouble. And what I remember about those lessons is it was very, very quiet. And I always felt really, really stifled. Now, I'm not a sort of person that needs to move all the time and do stuff all the time. I do it sometimes, but I remember those lessons as being really hard because nobody dared breathe loudly. And I remember some of those lessons were really hard. I don't remember learning much because I was spending so much time trying to be silent or distracted by the tiniest of noise, because, of course, he's then saying, right, everyone needs to be quiet, and making you quiet. So any noise at that point, even if it's, not necessarily on purpose, it's going to be magnified by the very silence that it appears within.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's such a hard environment to be in, and it's very hard to, if you don't relax, how can the brain learn? That's one of the biggest lessons that I hope is coming across, and I think has changed, is changing. It's the more we are relaxed, the more we are content within our nervous systems, then the brain is so much in a better place to be able to receive information, to process information, to remember information. Because anxiety, any form of anxiety, any sense of constriction is going to impact learning. It's certainly going to impact memory. Even like for those who've been perhaps at an interview recently, one of the things when you go to interview questionnaires or the training for if you're going to an interview, and they say, just feel free to ask the question again, because that's it. You're in a place, somebody asks you a question, you are highly anxious, you hear it, but it disappears straight out of your hearing. And so you just ask the interviewer again, sorry, could you repeat that, please? So we are trained to be able to ask nicely, can you repeat that, please? Because it is expected under pressure in a very anxious situation. If you can't calm your nervous system down sufficiently, but interviews are, you're needing to prove yourself. You're needing to be something often other than, you need to show the very best parts of you. And that's really quite stressful. So the brain just doesn't, it hears the question, but it can't remember it. And that's exactly the same in any school system, any academic situation. Much better to have happy brains to receive and process the information well.
I remember another teacher who wasn't one of my teachers. We had her one day, and all I remember about her lesson, and I still remember this to this day for some reason, I must have been 8 or 9 or something, is it was still fairly quiet in the room, but she was so much more welcoming and relaxed as you walked into the room, as she took over the being a teacher, that it wasn't silent, and yet it was still quiet. We could still write, we could still learn, but the whole mood and the environment was much more relaxed. And in a sense, she wasn't doing anything different. She was still teaching. It was the same children. It was the same school, sometimes the same classroom. The difference was the teacher, not that he was good or bad, and she was good or bad, because there's different learning styles, different teaching styles. I think it was the rigidity with which he enforced absolute silence, as opposed to her method of trying to create an open learning environment. And I remember really clearly, I couldn't work out why there weren't 11 digits. Because in my head, you start at 0 and you finished at 10. And I remember this. And I was like, but that's 11. That's 11 in a row. He's like, no. there's 10. But it took me so much courage to say to this teacher who likes silence, I
Mm.
really don't understand why the 10 digits, because surely the 10th digit, 10, that's the 11th one. And I just couldn't get it into my brain. But because of the rigidity of the silence, I was sitting there thinking, I don't understand. I daren't ask. I'm not allowed to ask a question. And when I finally bottled up courage, yeah, he answered the question. But I think it's one of those things of there are many learning styles, but when we enforce something too strictly, that isn't actually good for the wider group, is it?
No, and it would make me want to assess your teacher's sensory needs, that he may well have had auditory processing issues. And therefore, for him, having unexpected sounds and sounds happening all the time would have interrupted his own flow of teaching, his own processing, in which case there are certain people who I think as adults would be better finding a different job, not because they're not good at what they do, but just the environment that they've chosen to do it in isn't a good fit. So all adults, any of you listening out there at the moment, if you recognize that you have giftings, but you're not, it is definitely possible you could not be in a good fit for your actual work and your skills and your sensory needs. And that's a big thing to consider, and that who you are and how you are. In fact, I've got a meeting this afternoon with somebody who is an adult who is coming to me and recognizing that they don't have the skills that they need. They've had some warnings at church. Sorry, not at church. They've had some warnings in their workplace. And it's just like, but you are really, she's a really, really lovely person. So it's just like, how can we make things work for you? What is it that you need? How can we support you so that you are a good worker? And if we can't make a good fit within the environment that she's in, well, then we need to be looking at a different type of working environment where she can flourish and be a blessing and just be a really good worker in the area that she chooses to go into, and not because of the environment that is putting demands on her that her sensory needs can't handle, and that we can't make. If we can't make them work, we can't make them work. Go and find somewhere else. That there's always a place that is a good fit. Always a place. It's just a question of finding it.
And that, I love that, is the part of you that is the occupational therapist part, occupation meaning employment and jobs. Because I would never have gone to, maybe that teacher had some auditory processing struggles. I would never have gone there. That's why I'm not you. But yeah, I wouldn't have gone there.
I know, it's like taking the time. It's only when someone talks to me as well, I'm just thinking, oh, but, and I hear things now thinking, oh yeah, because I automatically would have gone, oh yeah, I had a teacher like this, and I could have given you a whole ream of things, and all of a sudden I'm just thinking, oh, actually, I would really want to help that teacher. I think there's something more. There's something more going on if they have to be that strict and that rigid, which some do. I was in another school actually, and the teacher always had background music on in the background, but it wasn't just background music. I would go into the class and be like, "Oh, this is like way too loud." It's like, what is going on? But I recognised that was that teacher's, particular needs, and just checking that how the students were coping with it all. Because again, if it's fine, if folks can function well enough, we're okay. It's when they can't.
Yeah, and it's those extremes, isn't it? Where it gets harder. I remember, I mean, this is not the same sort of thing, but I remember I was a truck driver for 15 years, 20 years. And people would say, oh, that reversing of that, you'd be driving in a car, you see an articulated lorry reversing into space. Oh, that's so complicated. Aren't they doing well? And I'd be saying, that's really easy. That's not hard at all. And I remember a few times thinking, oh, that's really judgmental. But then it would be Joe saying, yeah, but you did that. So actually you have the right to say whether that was good or bad. And another one was a guy driving along the road, give me a lift. And the truck went on the curb as it was going along. Oh, it must be so hard driving a truck. I said, why? That was just a stupid move by the driver. That's going too fast into a situation. And they said, sometimes I forget you actually used to do that thing, the 60-foot vehicle or longer. And I think sometimes we almost need permission to remember that we actually do have experiences that are valid for other people without feeling bad that I actually know that what that driver did was really stupid. No, It wasn't okay. Actually, that was really bad. What's wrong with them? Because we have different experiences.
Yeah, totally. And and it's having the diplomacy or working out when to say something and when not to say something. I still go back to that time in school just last month when I didn't say something, And I think I really should have done for the sake of the child, because the child was needing a sensory experience, had been asked to leave to give another child a go, and it just went downhill really, really rapidly. The kicking of the teachers and the screaming and the hitting of the walls and then going to the doors and kicking on those, and it was like, I should have just intervened and said, look, there is a time and a place for turn taking and discipline and all the rest of it, and this is not the place. He needs that to regulate. Just let him regulate, and then let's deal with that after. So yeah, there are times I think we do need to speak up, just have a little bit more boldness for the sake of somebody else. It's not always to show how good we are or anything else, but it's just if you know that that's something else that somebody needs, then do speak up.
And I think, quoting my wife for a moment, she would always say, if you need to challenge something, challenge the action, not the person. So don't ever assassinate their character. Oh, you're stupid because you did this. Rather, okay, what you're doing here is not okay. So you're actually challenging the action as opposed to the person who's making the action. Otherwise, you've got nowhere to go. If you say, well, you're wrong, you're stupid, you're bad, you're clumsy, where does somebody go from there? But if you say, okay, you've dropped that, that's not okay, we need to help you with that part, then you're actually in a position of being able to offer help rather than pushing somebody away and saying you're wrong, you're stupid, you're foolish, which is not gonna help anybody.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yep. My wife has some good little quotes. That's one of them. Never assassinate someone's character. Always question the action, not the person making the action.
Amen.
Okay, thank you, Anne, for another wonderful session. Yeah, so I'm going to write this down. Just give me that long thing. Just I'm going to write it down because I can't remember it.
Google it. It's just like, if I could describe it, it's just like, this is where we have the thing up on YouTube and show you the nerve tracts for those who are really interested.
That's why I want to write it down right.
Dorsal column medial lemniscus system.
So dorsal column. What's the next bit?
Medial.
I just spell medial.
Medial. It's in the middle.
MEDIL.
Yeah. Lemniscus. I think it's CAL, not CLE at the end. Lem ELEMNIS. CAL. Dorsal column medial lemniscus.
Right.
Tract.
Fine.
I tend to call them systems, but it's the tract.
I will add that to the notes because, yes, you can go off and Google that to see what Anne was actually talking about. If you're curious what that was, just watch the video again. And if you've listened and you've not watched it, then do watch this, because your face is great when I'm trying to say something that's not quite right.
But it's great because it's heavily myelinated. It sends impulses much quicker, and there's a lot to it. Again, I could come back next week and say, "Hey, what did you find out about the DCML?"
Yeah, we could. It's like an acronym for a military unit. But anyway, okay. Thank you, Anne. If you've got any questions or topics you want to know more about the dorsal column medial lemniscus system, then you can ask those as well. You can ask those as well. Hello at pure247radio.org. Hello at pure247radio.org. And if you want to be connected to Anne and ask her advice, like somebody's come along about their employment struggles because of potential sensory issues, then you can do that on our website best. So it's pure247radio.org, pure247radio.org/ALJ. Anne Laure Jackson, thank you.
Brilliant. Great to be here.
And we'll see you again next week.
See you then. Bye.